The first crack in the fragile facade of our sisterhood appeared not with a dramatic fight, but with a casual comment in a group chat. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was meticulously budgeting my grocery list for the week, calculating how many meals I could stretch from a single pack of chicken thighs. My phone, perched against the salt shaker, lit up with a flurry of messages from my family chat, aptly named the Fantastic Four. My sister, the self-appointed queen of this digital domain, had written, *update. We've officially booked the venue. The Maldives, baby. White sands, overwater bungalows, the whole dream, ***. A cascade of heart eye and party popper emojis followed from my parents. My mother added, ***, my little girl is getting married in paradise. I'm already shopping for mother of the bride outfits, ***. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The Maldives? A destination wedding? My stomach clenched with a familiar, cold dread. I was a freelance graphic designer, a title that sounded far more glamorous than it was. My income was a roller coaster, and the past 6 months had been a particularly steep drop. I was barely keeping up with my student loans and the rent for my one-bedroom apartment. A space so small I could practically cook dinner from my bed. I typed a cautious reply. **Wow, the Maldives. That's incredible. Sounds expensive for guests. ***. The response from my sister was immediate, a single line that felt like a slap. **Oh, we're keeping the guest list super intimate. Just immediate family and our closest friends. It's going to be really exclusive. ***. Intimate, exclusive. The words were deliberate, carefully chosen daggers. I was immediate family, weren't I? The official save the date never came to my mailbox. A week later, a glittering, palm tree-adorned digital version arrived in the group chat. It was addressed to Mom and Dad. I was not copied. I was a spectator to my own exclusion. I couldn't bear the silence anymore. I called my mother. "Mom," I started, my voice tighter than I intended. "I saw the save the date in the chat. I didn't get one." There was a long, painful sigh on the other end. "Oh, honey, we were going to tell you gently. Your sister, she's worried about the financial burden on everyone. And with your situation, we all thought it would be less awkward for you. You know, not having to say you can't afford it." The room seemed to tilt. My situation? You mean the fact that I don't have a trust fund like she does? The fact that I actually have to work for a living? Don't be dramatic, my mother chided, her voice taking on that sharp, dismissive tone I knew so well. It's her special day. She doesn't want anyone there out of obligation. She wants it to be perfect. And let's be honest, you've been a little sensitive lately about money. We didn't want you to feel uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable?" I repeated, the word tasting like ash. "I'm your daughter. She's my sister. You're telling me I'm not invited to my own sister's wedding because I'm poor?" "It's not about being poor, sweetheart. It's about being realistic," my father's voice boomed from the speakerphone. He had picked up the other line. "A trip to the Maldives is 5 figures, easy. Flights, the resort, the outfits, it's not a casual weekend trip. We're trying to protect you from the stress." Protect me. The ultimate condescension. They weren't protecting me, they were erasing me. They were sanitizing my sister's perfect day of my inconvenient financial reality. The final nail in the coffin came a few days later. A package arrived for me. Puzzled, I opened it to find a beautiful, embossed box. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a crystal champagne flute. A note card in my sister's flawless cursive read, "Dearest sister, while we sadly won't be able to have you with us in paradise to celebrate our big day, we wanted you to feel included. Please raise this glass and toast to us at exactly 5 p.m. Maldives time on the day of the wedding. We'll be thinking of you. Asterisk all our love. The bride and groom-to-be." I stared at the glass. It was the most elegant, most expensive insult I had ever received. A consolation prize. A pity flute. It wasn't an invitation, it was a monument to my exclusion. They would be thinking of me? I doubted it. They would be too busy sipping actual champagne in an overwater bungalow, laughing with their intimate group of wealthy friends, completely untroubled by my absence. I picked up the flute. It was heavy, cold, and exquisitely made. I carried it to my small kitchen, my hand trembling not with sadness but with a white-hot, clarifying rage. I held it over the sink, my grip tightening. But I didn't drop it. Instead, I placed it carefully on the counter. No, this wasn't going to be the end of the story. This crystal flute, this symbol of their condescension, would become my weapon. If they didn't want me at the wedding, fine. But they were going to remember I existed. They were going to remember me in a way they would never, ever forget. The plan began to form in my mind, not as a vague fantasy, but as a detailed, strategic campaign. It was audacious. It was petty. It was probably a little unhinged. And it was absolutely perfect. I opened my laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating my determined face. The first phase was intelligence. I needed details. The exact date, the name of the resort, the wedding coordinator's contact information. My sister, in her excitement, had posted all of this in the family chat weeks ago, never imagining I would use it for anything other than silent, envious observation. I was no longer observing. I was preparing for war. And the battlefield was her picture-perfect wedding reception. My sister's wedding was in 10 weeks. I had 70 days to orchestrate the most magnificent, long-distance revenge in the history of sibling rivalry. My initial, raw fury had cooled into a focused, determined calm. This wasn't just about getting back at her, it was about reclaiming my voice, my presence, and my power. They had reduced me to a financial statistic, a problem to be managed. I would remind them that I was a force to be reckoned with. My small apartment became my war room. A large, hand-drawn calendar was taped to the wall, each day marked with a specific task. My budget, usually dedicated to scraping by, was now ruthlessly reallocated. I cancelled streaming services, stopped buying coffee out, and lived on a diet of rice and beans. Every saved dollar was fuel for my mission. My first and most crucial move was to hire a local. Using a VPN to mask my location, I began scouring Maldivian freelance websites. I needed someone on the ground, someone with access to the resort, someone discreet. After several interviews conducted in the dead of night, I found him. A young man named Ismail who worked in the IT department of a rival, but connected, luxury resort. He was sharp, understood the irony of the situation, and, most importantly, needed the extra money I was offering. He became my eyes, ears, and eventual hands on the island. Phase 1. Infiltration. Through Ismail, I obtained the wedding itinerary, the seating plan, and, most importantly, the contact information for the wedding planner, a famously meticulous French woman named Colette. I studied the resort's layout, the reception venue, the menu, the playlist. I knew the event better than most of the guests. My sister had chosen a theme, gilded paradise. Everything was gold, white, and aquamarine. It was tasteful, expensive, and utterly predictable. My contributions would be less so. My initial plan was simple sabotage. Ordering 100 pizzas to the reception? Childish. Replacing the wedding cake with a cheap replica? Messy. I wanted something more elegant, more psychologically devastating. I wanted the revenge to be a slow burn revelation. Something that would unravel throughout the evening and leave a permanent scar on their precious memories. The idea came to me at 3 a.m., as the best and worst ideas often do. It was a two-pronged attack, one digital, one physical. Both would strike at the heart of their carefully curated image. The digital assault was my domain. As a graphic designer, I was a master of visual storytelling. I created a series of images. The first was a beautiful, professionally designed in memoriam slide. It featured a stunning, soft focus photo of me, looking wistfully off camera, with the text, "Sadly unable to attend due to budgetary constraints." It was designed to be slipped into the slideshow of childhood photos they would inevitably play during the reception. The second was a series of fake advertisements for a fictional company I called Sister Fund. The ads looked like sophisticated social media promotions. Tired of being excluded from family milestones? One read, "Sister Fund provides interest-free loans for sisters in need. Don't let finances keep you from your sister's big day." Another featured a stock photo of a woman looking sad, with the caption, "She got a destination wedding. You got a champagne flute. We see the imbalance." I would have these displayed as sponsored content on the digital welcome sign at the reception entrance. The physical prank required more finesse. I wanted to gift them something magnificent. Something that would initially seem like a generous, reconciliatory peace offering from the excluded sister, only to reveal its true nature later. I spent weeks researching. I settled on a custom-made, multi-tiered wedding cake topper. It would be exquisitely crafted, featuring miniature porcelain replicas of the bride and groom in their wedding attire. But with a twist. Using a 3D modeling program, I designed the groom figurine to have a small, hidden compartment in its base. And the bride figurine, I gave her a detachable head. I found a reclusive, brilliant artisan in Poland on Etsy who specialized in miniature satire. When I explained the concept, there was a long pause on the other end of the email chain. Then, a single reply, "This is the most beautifully petty commission I have ever received. I accept." The final piece of the puzzle was the grand finale. I needed something that would unite the digital and the physical in a spectacular, undeniable climax. I decided on a fireworks display. But not just any fireworks. I commissioned a custom pyrotechnics show from a company in China. The grand finale would not spell out "just married." It would spell out "she wasn't invited." My days became a whirlwind of covert activity. I communicated with Ismail through an encrypted messaging app. I wired payments to Poland and China through a convoluted series of small transfers to avoid suspicion. I practiced my hacking skills, finding a shockingly weak password for the resort's event portal, Bride 2024, and embedding my fake advertisements directly into their digital schedule. The cost was staggering. I drained my meager savings account. I sold my vintage record collection, my designer handbag, a relic from a more prosperous time, and even my laptop, working frantically from the computers at the public library. The financial risk was insane, but the emotional payoff would be priceless. This was no longer just about revenge, it was an investment in my own sanity. 2 days before the wedding, the final pieces were in place. The cake topper was en route to the resort via express international shipping. Labeled as a wedding gift from the groom's long-lost aunt. Ismail confirmed he had bribed a kitchen worker to ensure it was placed on the cake. The fireworks company had confirmed the launch coordinates and timing. My digital bombs were preloaded and ready to detonate. I sat in my dark apartment, the glow of my phone the only light. On the screen was a live webcam feed from a public beach a mile down from my sister's resort. I wouldn't be able to see the reception, but I would see the fireworks. I held the crystal champagne flute in my hand. They were probably packing their designer outfits, giddy with anticipation. They had no idea that the sister they'd written off, the one they deemed too poor to matter, had just orchestrated the most expensive prank of their lives. The ghost at the feast was no longer silent. She was the architect of the feast's destruction. I allowed myself a small, cold smile. The stage was set. The players were in position. All that was left was for the bride to walk down the aisle, completely unaware that her perfect day was a ticking time bomb. And I was holding the detonator. On the day of the wedding, I treated myself to a cheap bottle of Prosecco. As 5 p.m. Maldives time approached, 8 a.m. my time, I filled the cursed crystal flute. I raised it not to my sister's happiness, but to the glorious chaos that was about to unfold. Half a world away, under the blistering equatorial sun, the ceremony went off without a hitch. Ismail, posing as a technician, sent me a single, blurry photo. My sister, radiant in her custom-designed gown, kissing her new husband. The intimate group of 50 guests clapped and cheered. My parents wept tears of joy, their minds conveniently free of any guilt or concern for their other daughter. The first part of their perfect day was complete. The reception began as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The guests moved to a stunning, open-air pavilion decorated with flowing white silk and thousands of twinkling lights. This was the moment. Phase 1, the digital onslaught. As guests approached the pavilion, a large, elegant digital screen displayed a welcome message. Welcome to the wedding of bride and groom. Below it, the evening's itinerary scrolled by. Right on schedule, the screen flickered. For a 30-second loop, my fake sister fund advertisements began to play. The one with the sad-looking woman and the caption, "She got a destination wedding. You got a champagne flute," played on a loop. Guests murmured, confused. A few chuckled awkwardly. My brother-in-law's wealthy college friends, who knew nothing of my existence, pointed and laughed, assuming it was an inside joke. My mother, seeing the screen, went pale. She frantically waved over a staff member. "What is this? Turn it off." By the time a flustered technician managed to reboot the system, the damage was done. The seed of awkwardness had been planted. Phase 2, the slideshow sabotage. Later, during dinner, the lights dimmed for the traditional slideshow. Pictures of my sister and her new husband flashed across the screen. Baby photos, school plays, college graduations. The guests oohed and awed. Then, a new slide appeared. It was my in memoriam photo. I looked beautiful and tragically sad. The text, sadly unable to attend due to budgetary constraints, was written in an elegant gold script. A dead silence fell over the pavilion. You could hear the waves lapping against the stilts below. Then, a confused whisper rippled through the crowd. "Who is that? Is that the bride's sister? What does this mean?" My sister, sitting at the sweetheart table, stared at the screen. Her smile frozen into a horrified rictus. My father stood up so quickly he knocked over his chair. "What is the meaning of this?" he boomed. From my apartment, I received a flurry of panicked texts from Ismail. "The slide is up. Mother is crying. Bride looks like she saw a ghost. Asterisk." I took a long sip of Prosecco. The show was just beginning. Phase 3, the cake topper catastrophe. Asterisk asterisk. The moment of the cake cutting arrived. The 5-tiered masterpiece was wheeled out. My sister, trying to regain her composure, picked up the silver cake knife. That's when she saw it. The beautiful, gilded cake topper. It was us. Me and her. As children. I was depicted handing her a single, wilting flower, while she held a sparkling tiara. The detail was incredible. At first, some guests thought it was sweet. "Oh, look, she included her sister," someone said. But as the camera zoomed in for the close-up shot being projected on the screen, the true nature of the topper became clear. My miniature face wore an expression of profound sadness. Hers was one of smug triumph. And then, as my sister reached to remove the topper before cutting the cake, the head of her figurine popped clean off, rolled across the icing, and dropped onto the floor with a tiny, ceramic click. A collective gasp filled the room. The symbolism was too perfect, too brutal to ignore. The bride's decapitation, orchestrated by the uninvited sister. The silence was broken by my mother's sob. My phone buzzed again. Ismail's message was a masterpiece of understatement. Cake topper was a success. The bride has left the pavilion. The groom is arguing with the wedding planner. Asterisk. The grand finale, a sky-written reality check. Asterisk asterisk. The reception was in shambles. The perfect, curated event was now a spectacle of familial dysfunction. Guests were huddled in groups, whispering. My parents were frantically trying to do damage control. My sister was reportedly locked in her bungalow, weeping. That's when the first firework shot into the sky. It was unannounced, a complete surprise. The guests, thinking it was part of the planned festivities, filtered out onto the beach. Looking up in anticipation, rockets of silver and gold exploded overhead, forming beautiful, intricate patterns. For a moment, it seemed like the resort had organized a stunning display to salvage the evening. And then came the finale. A single rocket shot up, higher than the rest. It burst into a shower of brilliant crimson sparks. Then another, and another, spelling out letters against the velvet night sky. S-H-E. A murmur of confusion. W-A-S-N-T. Realization began to dawn on the crowd. My father's face, illuminated by the flashing lights, was a mask of dawning horror. I-N-V-I-T-E-D. She wasn't invited. Asterisk. The words hung in the sky, burning with righteous indignation. Visible for miles along the coast. For a full 10 seconds, the message blazed, a public confession of their private cruelty. Then, it faded into smoke and drifted out to sea. The beach was utterly silent. Then, the whispers began in earnest. The story was out. The secret was no longer a family matter, it was public entertainment. The excluded sister had not only crashed the wedding, she had bombed it from 10,000 miles away. In my apartment, I watched the live webcam feed. I couldn't see the fireworks, but I saw the reactions of the people on the public beach. They were pointing, laughing, pulling out their phones to record the sky. The story was already going viral. I finally drank from the crystal flute. The cheap Prosecco tasted like victory. I set the empty glass down on my counter. It was no longer a symbol of my exclusion. It was a trophy. My phone began to ring. It was my mother, then my father, then my sister. I ignored them all. The silence from my end was now more powerful than any words I could have shouted. The reception was, as promised, unforgettable, but not in the way my sister had planned. Her perfect day was now permanently, publicly, and spectacularly marred. And I, the ghost, the afterthought, the one who couldn't afford it, had become the central character of her wedding story. The digital fallout was immediate and merciless. By the time my family's flight touched down back in the United States, the story had already been picked up by multiple online outlets. Jilted sister's epic revenge goes viral. The Maldives wedding prank heard round the world. Someone from the wedding had filmed the entire fireworks display on their phone, and the clip had spread like wildfire. My sister fund ads, screenshotted by guests, became memes. The image of my sad in memoriam slide was shared thousands of times with the caption, "Sister of the Year." I was no longer the poor, forgotten relative. I was an icon of poetic justice for anyone who had ever felt excluded by their own family. The voicemails piled up. My mother's were hysterical, alternating between sobbing apologies and furious accusations. "How could you humiliate us like this? We're a laughingstock." My father's were cold and threatening, full of talk of lawyers and financial restitution for the damages I had caused. My sister's was a single, venomous message: "I will never, ever forgive you. You ruined my life." I didn't respond to any of them. For the first time in my life, I held all the power. Their anger was a testament to the effectiveness of my plan. They weren't sorry for what they had done. They were sorry they got caught and publicly shamed. A week after their return, there was a pounding on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole to see my parents standing there, their faces drawn and angry. I took a deep breath and opened the door, but left the chain on. "Have you lost your mind?" My father spat, his voice trembling with rage. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The wedding planner is suing us. The resort is threatening a lawsuit for the unauthorized fireworks. Your sister is a wreck." I'm not the one who decided a sister's presence at a wedding was a budgetary concern, I replied, my voice eerily calm. "This wasn't about money," my mother cried. "It was about atmosphere. We wanted a stress-free, elegant event." "You wanted an event free of *me," I corrected her. "You didn't want my financial instability to be an eyesore. You didn't want to have to explain why your daughter was staying in a cheaper hotel or couldn't afford the designer dress. You wanted to pretend I didn't exist for the duration of your perfect party." The truth of my words hung in the hallway. They had no rebuttal because there was none. "We are your family." My father tried again, falling back on the final, feeble defense. "Are you?" I asked, looking from one to the other. "Family doesn't exclude. Family doesn't send a champagne flute as a placeholder for a sister." You made it abundantly clear where I stand. I was just creative in showing you that I finally understood the assignment. I closed the door on their stunned faces and locked it. The finality of the click was the most liberating sound I had ever heard. In the weeks that followed, the viral fame faded, as it always does. But the internal shift for me was permanent. The revenge had served its purpose. It wasn't about hurting them, but about freeing myself. The immense effort and financial sacrifice had been a form of therapy. A way to externalize the years of built-up pain and marginalization. I used the notoriety to my advantage. I rebranded my freelance business, leaning into the story. My website now read, Graphic Designer and Strategic Creative, specializing in making your message unforgettable. I got a flood of new clients, all curious to work with the Maldives wedding sister. My income, for the first time, became stable and substantial. I never paid back the money I had borrowed from my savings and sold possessions. I considered it an investment in my mental health and professional launch. I bought a new laptop, a better one. I even purchased a real, comfortable armchair for my apartment. As for my family, we entered a state of Cold War. They stopped inviting me to holidays. The family chat went silent. It was painful, but it was an honest pain, not the slow, corrosive ache of being a second-class citizen in my own family. About 6 months later, a small package arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside, nestled in crumpled newspaper, was the head of the bride figurine from the cake topper. There was no note. It was my sister's version of an olive branch, a twisted, broken, but undeniable acknowledgement of what had happened. I placed it on my bookshelf, next to the crystal flute. They were my trophies, my reminders. The final chapter of the story came from an unexpected source. My brother-in-law's aunt, a sharp, wealthy woman in her 70s whom I had never met, tracked down my business email. "Dear girl," she wrote, "I was at that disastrous wedding. I have to say, while I don't condone public spectacles, I've never seen a more brilliantly executed piece of social commentary. Your family are a bunch of snobs, and your sister is a brat. It was the most entertaining wedding I've ever attended, and I've been to over 100. If you ever need a reference, don't hesitate to ask. Some of us appreciate a woman with guts." I wrote back a simple, gracious thank you. It was the only correspondence with anyone connected to my family that didn't leave me feeling drained or angry. They thought my revenge was about a wedding. It wasn't. It was about a narrative. For years they had written my story for me, the struggling one, the less than, the afterthought. With one spectacular, explosive, and yes, deeply petty act, I seized the pen. I rewrote the ending. I wasn't invited to my sister's destination wedding. But in the end, I didn't need an invitation to claim my place in the family history. I carved it out myself, with the precision of a graphic designer and the fury of a woman who had finally been pushed too far. The little sister they thought they could ignore had made their perfect day unforgettable. And in doing so, had finally made herself impossible to forget.